Hi, I'm Jeff Morris, and in this video, I'll be doing another low light comparison with the new DJI Air 2S, but this time it'll be going up against the 5-year-old Phantom 4 Pro. I've been wanting to do this comparison for a while now. Both drones have a 1-inch sensor and do pretty good at night, so I can't wait to see which one comes out on top, which one I'll be keeping, and which one I'll be selling. Let's get to it. For this first location, I chose a spot that's a little bit on the dark side, and I'll be flying a little bit higher just to give you a good idea how these cameras will handle a really low lit scene. I'll be keeping my camera settings the same on both the Air 2S and the Phantom 4 Pro for these tests. Both were shot in 4K 24 frames per second with the normal color profile selected and an aperture of f2.8. Starting with ISO 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600. I found when flying this high at night, you really need to be in a well-lit location. Otherwise, you will have to bump the ISO way up to 3200 or even 6400. Both ISOs could benefit from some noise reduction in post, but I wouldn't want to go above 3200 if I didn't have to. The image is just too noisy at the max ISO of 6400. I should mention that I'm shooting with a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second here. I had a couple people comment on my Air 2S versus the Mavic Air 2 low light video and ask if I could also show a comparison at 1/25th of a second shutter, since the drones already struggle to capture clean video at night. Speeding through some of these lower, darker ISOs, it's not until we hit 1600 that I start to notice much of a difference between the shutter speeds. You can clearly see here that ISO 1600 with the 1/25th of a second shutter looks pretty similar in brightness to 3200 ISO from the 1/50th of a second shutter shot, but a lot cleaner. You can definitely see a major difference in brightness between the two shots here at ISO 3200 and even more so at 6400. I do like how I can get a brighter image at ISO 3200 with the 1/25th of a second shutter. I can't help but notice the clip is really starting to show more noise in the shadows and especially in the sky. Out of curiosity, I decided to switch out of the manual settings and see what the automatic mode looked like. As you can see here, it looks identical to the 1/25th second shutter at ISO 3200. Alright, now we're going to check out the Phantom 4 Pro's footage and start comparing it to the Air 2S. I'm not seeing much of a difference in these lower ISOs, so we'll just skip to ISO 1600. 1600 ISO on the Phantom 4 Pro looks nice, but let's see what it looks like next to the Air 2S footage. First thing I'm noticing is the Phantom footage looks a lot flatter and has less contrast than the Air 2S shot, even though both were shot in the normal color profiles. I'm also seeing that the Air 2S footage has a lot more detail and is a bit sharper than the Phantom 4 Pro. It's even more noticeable when looking at the 1/25th of a second shutter footage. 3200 ISO with the 1/50th shutter seems to be the sweet spot for both drones, but so far I'm really liking the Air 2S footage better. Once we switch to 1/25th of a second shutter at ISO 3200, the noise really starts to show up in both shots. Lastly, we have the max ISO of 6400, and it looks like both shots have way too much noise, especially in the clips that were shot at 1/25th of a second shutter. Alright, I changed my location for these next couple of shots. It's a little bit brighter here, so I'll be flying quite a bit lower, and I think it's the perfect spot to really do a good comparison between the two drones. ISO 1600 is still pretty dark with the 1/50th shutter. 3200 is better. You can start to see the Phantom 4 Pro image is slightly brighter, and surprisingly, if I zoom in 100%, you can see that the Phantom 4 Pro shot looks sharper than the Air 2S, which is strange because the Air 2S was sharper looking in the last test near the freeway. Max ISO of 6400 is grainy on both shots, but definitely could be cleaned up in post if you know how to denoise an image. Let's drop down the shutter to 1/25th of a second. 1600 is already starting to look good, but I'd be more likely to use ISO 3200 for a shot like this. The Phantom 4 Pro image is brighter at 3200 ISO, especially when you look at the sky, but that brighter image really starts to show the noise you get when shooting at these higher ISOs. Topping out at 6400 ISO, you'll really start to notice that the Air 2S handles the noise considerably better than the Phantom 4 Pro, but it would still require some work in post to clean it up. For the final test, I went with the classic straight down shot, and it pretty much confirmed what I was already seeing in the other comparisons. 1600 is too dark. ISO 3200 seems to be the sweet spot for both drones. For a brighter lit scene, you would be better off shooting with a 1/50th of a second shutter. For something darker, you will probably want to use 1/25th of a second shutter, but be aware it will be noisier and may require work to clean it up. And lastly, ISO 6400 is pretty much garbage and should be avoided. Wrapping things up, I would have to say that I like the Air 2S footage over the Phantom 4 Pro. It seems to handle the noise better and, in my opinion, just looks better than the Phantom 4 Pro. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumb down below and subscribe to my channel if you're interested in seeing more videos like this. I'm currently working on another Air 2S low light video and we'll be uploading that shortly.